Well, I can trust you. We're all going to be trying to anticipate what these results mean for an upcoming general election in May. And as Sheldine said, the Wild Rose, the UCP candidate who won this riding back in 2019 won with 61% of the vote. Now, let's say, just for the sake of argument, Danielle Smith gets 5% lower than that. Then all us math nerds are going to be going through past election results, and we're going to be thinking, well, what if 5% support is knocked off the board in every single seat? How many seats do the UCP win under that scenario? If she's lost 10 points, how many seats get lost if she loses 10 points? So these are the kinds of games that we play. And, as we said, 61% is what a rookie, not very well-known candidate got in 2019. Any less than that, and we're going to be wondering what that could possibly mean in other places around the province and what the electoral math looks like if the UCP is not as strong as they were in 2019.
Smith won the by-election seat, taking 54.5% of the vote, with the NDP candidate, Gwendolyn Dirk, placing second with just shy of 27%, and Alberta Party leader Barry Morishita coming in third with 16.5% of the votes. Well, it's time for our post-by-election politics panel. We're joined by Sheila Pratt, a freelance journalist and political observer, and political columnist Graham Thompson. Graham, yesterday the magic number pundits were throwing out, including here on Alberta Primetime, was not 50 plus 1 or 54, but 61%, the amount the previous UCP MLA for the riding won by in 2019. What do you make of the margin that we saw last night?
Yeah, this should have been a blowout for Danielle Smith, because she is the premier, well known, and she ran, of course, a 5-month campaign to become leader of the UCP and then be made premier. So people knew her. Plus, she was focused a lot on rural Alberta, of course, meaning the areas outside the big cities, outside of Edmonton and Calgary. She called herself a rural-minded premier. So she's in a riding. It's a safe riding. They chose that riding for her specifically because they weren't going to run her in Calgary Elbow that's vacant right now. So she's running in a rural riding, if you can call it that. She is well known. She is the premier. This is a safe UCP seat, and she got 55% of the vote. Now, of course, that's well ahead of the NDP, a 28-point lead. But if you join in the NDP votes with the Alberta Party votes, then all of a sudden that 28-point lead becomes a 10 or 11-point lead. She didn't do particularly well, considering all the things that were in her favor. Very low turnout. Of course, that's normal for a by-election. But in this by-election here, you have a new premier trying to excite people about the fact that she is now leader, focused on these issues, areas like Brooks Medicine Hat, and people did not come out. You can blame the weather, but at the same time, this is a problem for Smith, and it points to the various polls we're seeing in the last few weeks indicating that the UCP is not doing particularly well under their new leader. And this by-election result last night was a win, but it wasn't the blowout that it should have been for someone in her position.
Sheila, an average Albertan might be saying, well, 54%, that is more than double the second place finisher. Janet was talking about the math nerds, though, coming out and really dissecting those numbers today. Is this the vote of confidence that this new leader was looking for?
Well, I agree with Graham. It's not as big as it should have been, given she was in the heartland, she was in rural Alberta that she's wanting to represent. But I think if you look closer at the numbers, you'll see another issue, that in the city of Medicine Hat, she only won 7 of the 29 polls, and the NDP won 20 of the polls there, which would suggest her assumption and her strategy assumption that, she just needs a few seats at Edmonton or in Calgary because she's going to win vastly in rural Alberta. But it may be these small cities with a more urban feel to them are not exactly falling in line the way she expects the rest of rural Alberta to do that. And of course, if that's the case, look twice at even Peace River that used to have an NDP candidate, suburbs around Edmonton. You might want to watch Red Deer and Grand Prairie. You don't want to over extrapolate from one by-election, but certainly the fact that she was virtually did not win much at all in Medicine Hat itself, that her thesis that don't worry, rural Alberta's mine, I'll get a few seats in Calgary and win. And secondly, of course, she's got this mandate from one riding for a very controversial and right-wing agenda that's kind of out of the norm. So there will be some people, that even in her own caucus, who have some doubts about this agenda. So it's going to be interesting to see how far she can carry that. Since it's not the overwhelming victory that, say, Kenny got 71% when he ran in a by-election in Calgary. So this is not a party with the same sweep that the UCP had.
Graham, to that point of looking at the city of Medicine Hat and the turnout there, does this give pause to Premier Smith's rural first philosophy, or, perhaps light a fire under the opposition NDP and some of their strategy in smaller or more rural communities?
Well, yeah, right now you can see the NDP looking at this saying, look, we did really well in Medicine Hat. And this, of course, goes to this issue that, as Sheila pointed out, the reasoning behind Smith in terms of her being optimistic about the upcoming election in May is that, the UCP has 39 of 41 seats outside of the big cities. And she's hoping to hang on to those 39. And then now she needs another 5, 6 to get, 44 seats necessary to get a majority government in May of next year during the general election. And this is a problem. The NDP is actually winning most of the polls in the city of Medicine Hat. And here she is. Smith is the premier running in a riding that she said she's going to focus on rural Alberta. But again, that's a bit of a misnomer. When you look at the rural areas, a lot of them have either large towns or small cities. This is going to be a real problem for her because all of a sudden she can't count on areas that have small cities like Medicine Hat. So they're going to rethink their position in this reasoning that she can win by getting rural seats, if I can call them that, plus a few seats in Calgary. So they're going to rethink their strategy, and also they're going to stop just hammering away at the federal government and blaming the federal government for all the problems that are facing Alberta, and be a bit more positive as opposed to being always angry. And, of course, stop bringing up the pandemic and how hurt some people in rural areas felt during the pandemic. And how, of course, as she has said, Smith has called them the group that's faced the most discrimination of anybody she's seen in the last 50 years. So she has to change tack. She has to do it a different direction and realize that the province, you've seen polls, like the CBC poll out just last week, showing that it's not just a sure thing that the UCP under Smith can win all the seats outside of the big cities like Edmonton and Calgary.